Would the staff at LaFouche please introduce yourself to the record? We may be having some audio. We can't hear it. Oh, it doesn't appear that you all are connected to audio.
Captain Davis, you can connect the audio, click on the microphone next to the little camera icon. You have to push the little.
There you go. All right. So we've got you now. Can the staff there introduce themselves for the record? Okay, now you're on mute. There you go. Now we got you. Can the staff introduce themselves, please?
I'm Daniel Verzwyvelt.
Staff. Kathy, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, this is Captain Davis. And we have Deputy Charles Tadaro.
Thank you. And all right, Daniel, you'll go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us your name and your DOC number.
Daniel Verzwyvelt, 00518695.
Verzwyvelt.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Okay. Daniel, my name is Cheryl Renatz. I'm serving as chairman of your parole panel this morning. Mr. Roche is seated to my left. Mrs. Jackson is seated to my right. Let me acknowledge some folks who have joined us. We have your mother who's joined us by Zoom, and she'll be speaking at the appropriate time. We also have some folks here representing the victim, Jonathan Fowler, Lacey Fowler, and Jennifer Fowler, along with the assistant district attorney also has joined us. Who'll be speaking at the appropriate time. First, I'll just read some identifying information into the record, ask you to confirm it. In case it's been assigned to Mrs. Jackson, so she'll start the interview process. We'll hear from the captain or the deputy if they have any input. Then we'll hear from the folks that have indicated they want to speak this morning. At the end, you'll be allowed to make a statement before we go.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so Mr. Verzwyvelt, you're here today. Let's see, you are serving a 10-year sentence. You are possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and vehicular homicide. You have a parole eligibility date, November 28, 2022. You are not eligible for good time. Your full term date, May 27, 2024. Does all that sound correct?
Yes, ma'am. Except the firearm charge was dropped to an attempted possession.
Okay, I do see that. Thank you for that clarification. Would you answer Ms. Jackson's questions?
Good morning. I'm Bonnie Jackson. Your case has been assigned to me. I'll start the questioning. I'm going to call you Daniel. That'll make things go a lot faster. All right. So Daniel, how old are you?
I'm 39.
And how long have you been incarcerated on this particular offense?
8.5 years and 1 month.
And your full term date is in May of 2024. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the incident that led to the death of the victim in this case. Tell us what you have been doing on that.
What I've been doing since the wreck, or
On the day of the wreck, what?
I've been at the casino all night, and I've been using that night and, we had been four-wheeler riding all day the day before, and
Oh, slow down. Using what?
methamphetamines.
How much do you think you did?
I'd say probably a couple grams over the course of the day and a half.
And was there alcohol consumed while at the casino?
No, ma'am,
You drink alcohol?
not really.
So primarily you were a meth user?
Yes, ma'am.
How long have you been a meth user? Meth.
I'd say at the time, probably 12 years, but I'd had clean time on and off in between those 12 years.
So how long had you been in relapse status from the day of this incident?
At that point, I'd been relapsed probably a couple years, 2 or 3 years.
All right, well, what had you done to address your issues with the meth? In that 2 or 3 year period, what efforts had you made to deal with your addiction?
Not really any at that time. I fell into a low part of my life, and I can't say I really did anything to deal with it at that time.
Why not?
I guess I just wasn't ready.
Have you ever gone through any kind of long-term substance abuse?
Yes, ma'am. I've been to rehab 3 times, and then one time I went to Red River, and then I went to the O'Brien house for 6 months after that. So
All of this prior to the crime that you are serving time for,
yes, ma'am.
and you continually relapse. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
On the date of this incident, how many encounters, if you will, did you have with the one law enforcement?
3 encounters.
Let's go through the first one. What was the first one?
The first one, I wrecked in a ditch at the casino, and the second one,
Answer. Tell me about the incident where you wrecked in the ditch.
I guess my body was shutting down, and I fell asleep with my truck in gear.
And you ended up in a ditch. Is that correct? You're frozen.
Okay, we're back. It had shut down for a moment.
All right. So you fell asleep, you ended up in a ditch. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did law enforcement come in contact with law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
And what happened as a result of that contact?
The law enforcement called the tow truck, and the truck pulled me out, and then I was let go.
So, well, how did you leave the scene?
I drove away.
So they just told you, did they talk to you? Did they interact with you to see that you were impaired?
Yes, ma'am. It took an hour for at least an hour for the tow truck to get there, and I was talking with them the whole time.
Okay, and they just let you go.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, tell me about the second encounter you had with law enforcement.
The second one, I was turning right to get on my road in Alexandria, and I guess I fell asleep again and rear-ended somebody there.
So what happened in that encounter?
Law enforcement showed up, and Probably sat there 30 or 45 minutes and they let me go again.
And how far were you from where you live?
At that point, probably about 8 miles.
Did you have a cell phone?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you call anybody to say, look, I need somebody to come and get me. I'm not in any condition to drive.
No, ma'am, I didn't.
Why not? You've fallen asleep twice. You run off the road into a ditch. You ran into the back of someone. Did you feel like you were in a condition to continue to operate a motor vehicle?
Oh, ma'am, I guess in my way of thinking, I wasn't thinking correctly, you know. Believe me, if I could go back to that day, I would have definitely called someone to come get me.
You can't.
Yes, ma'am, I know this.
Problem. And then how long after that did you cross the center line and hit the victim's truck? How long after that?
I'd say about 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes.
And tell us how that collision occurred.
I fell asleep again and crossed the center line and hit Mr. Fowler head on.
And what happened when law enforcement got there the third time?
I ended up getting transported by ambulance to the hospital.
Did you suffer any significant?
No, ma'am, no significant injuries. I think it was just a concussion. That was it.
And were you arrested?
They took my blood and it took a month and a half for the blood to get back from the lab. And that's when I was arrested.
How long did you stay in jail before you were able to post?
I'd never posted bond.
You've been in jail from the date of offense until today's date?
Yes, ma'am, from May 30th of 2014.
All right, so you have been in work release for how long?
January 27th will make 3 years.
And where do you work?
I work for offshore lift boats.
What do you do there?
I'm a ordinary seaman crane operator.
So how often do you go offshore?
Yes, ma'am.
How often do you go offshore?
I usually stay out 90 days at a time, and then I come in for 3 or 4 days.
So you really haven't been in prison, you've been on the boat.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you taken any kind of program?
No, ma'am. And when I came here 4.5 years short. I was at River Bend before here, and every time I tried to get into program, you got too much time. They only had like 2 or 3 classes at that time.
So you've never taken any kind of substance abuse program?
No, ma'am.
You haven't taken any kind of victim awareness program?
No, ma'am.
So basically, you have spent the last 3 years being on a boat,
Yes, ma'am.
3 days, and then going back out. So why do you think this board, given the series of events that occurred on the date that this crime was committed, the fact that you've taken absolutely no program, and you essentially are spending most of your time working offshore, why do you think this board should grant you an early release?
The man that sits before you today is not the same man that got arrested in 2014.
I don't know that.
When I come in, I do go to AA meetings, and on the boat, I do study. I have my daily reflections and my AA big book I go over, and I have guys on the boat. It's like a big family out there with me. That's my family now, and I talk with them very often.
Well, that's wonderful. However, you have a history of failed substance abuse issues, failed recoveries. You've not seen programs, you've not had any long-term substance abuse treatment. No victim awareness. What would you, I didn't ask you that. Is there anyone in the room that can tell us something about this center?
Yes, ma'am. Lieutenant Cadell, I'm the job coordinator. Since Daniel came in on January 27th of 2020, he was put to work about a month later at Offshore Lift Boats, has sustained his job. Started off, I think, making $100 a day just as a deckhand. And he has since then, I think it's 240, Daniel?
220.
220 a day he's up to, which he said he was doing. He's a crane operator and an able-bodied seaman.
Ordinary sin.
I'm sorry, ordinary seaman. He has, since he's been there, I mean, I have a letter from the CEO of the company he works for. It shows that he started as a deckhand, he was promoted to an ordinary seaman and a crane operator, and he's now preparing to attend Merchant Marine Academy and for his able-bodied seaman certification. It's the first job I put Daniel on, and he's still on it today. Disciplinary, we haven't had any disciplinary with him since we've been here.
Well, he hadn't been there very often.
I understand, yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Danny, what would you say to this family who's been ripped apart by your action? And they know that, there were occasions on that day that had law enforcement responded differently, had you responded differently, this never would have happened. They're hearing that you're basically living a free person's life on a boat with friends more often than you're in a jail cell. So what would you say to them as you sit before them asking to be released early from a sentence that was short in light of the severity of the harm? What would you say to them today?
I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about Mr. Fowler and his family. I pray for them each and every night that they find it in their hearts to forgive me for what I did so I can fully forgive myself. And I mean, I've sat down and tried to write a letter to them hundreds of times. And what do you say? I mean, it getting past the first sentence, I can get the first sentence, but it's just, I choke up. I mean, I've tried.
All right, that's all I have into tonight, so thank you. So, what's your level of education?
I did one semester in college.
What were you taking?
Just general studies at the time. I hadn't really made up my mind what I wanted to do.
What, so do you have any children?
Yes, ma'am. One boy, 17.
17. So you're making pretty good money on the boat. Are you sending money to the son
Yes, ma'am.
regularly?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I don't have any other questions. We'd like to hear from your mom. Miss Deborah, did we hear from you, ma'am?
Yes,
What would you like us to know?
ma'am.
What would you like us to know?
I'm sorry. My son Daniel is a good person with a big heart, who unfortunately made some very poor choices with drug addiction. He has been incarcerated now for 8.5 years, and I have seen him change for the better. Daniel attends AA meetings, and when brought back to the facility, is working on his recovery of addiction. He is currently on work release for a lift boat company offshore. The company has guaranteed him a job when he gets released. Daniel is a hard worker and will continue to do a good job for them. When I speak with Daniel, either on the phone or in person, we often talk about the accident and the choices he made that day. Daniel realizes that if he would not be sentenced, he probably would have not turned his life around for the better. When he does get discouraged, I remind Daniel that God is in control and his plan is a perfect one. Daniel believes this with all of his heart, as he was sent to Catholic school for all of his education. Daniel has a good support system at home. This journey has led our family only to be stronger and pull closer together. Daniel has a son that was 8 years old when the accident happened. His son is now 17 and a junior in high school. Although they have maintained a good relationship over the last 8.5 years, it would be appreciated if Daniel could guide his son and spend more personal time with him. As for the family of the victim, our hearts go out to them. There isn't a day that they are not thought of and prayed for. Daniel has often said, if he could just turn back the hands of time. But unfortunately, that is not possible. I'm asking the parole board to grant Daniel his parole today, as he is a changed person for the better and is in recovery and continues to work on that recovery. I've seen a big change in Daniel. I feel like I've gotten my son back, the son that I raised. He was always involved in sports, 4-H, always involved in school activities and church activities. And I know the good he has in him. I really do feel that he has changed for the better. I hear it when I talk to him. I hear it in his voice. When I see him, he looks good and he talks positive. And he does realize that this accident was a horrible thing that happened. But if he wouldn't have been sentenced and incarcerated, he would have gone down much worse path. I just ask you to please have mercy on him.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Deborah.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, we'd like to hear from the folks here with us, and I'll let you all decide who wants to speak first. You just introduce yourself, tell us your relationship to the victim and whatever you want to tell us.
Yes, my name is Jonathan Feller. I'm the son of David Feller. We're going to read two background statements from my sister Lacey Feller and myself. The first one's from Lacey. She wrote, on April 20th, 2014, I lost a very important person to me, my dad. The day it happened was on Easter Sunday that year. I was always told that I was a daddy's girl. Words can't describe how that day made a huge impact on myself and my family. Remember that day, I was in complete shock. That Sunday morning on April 20th, 2014, I randomly woke up early. I was able to give my dad a hug goodbye that morning. It was a few hours later that we thought my dad would be home. My dad had planned on going to get a trailer truck at my Uncle Robert's house. I knew that the driver voice to my building didn't take too long. I called his phone a few times, texted, and did not get a response. My mom and brother tracked him on the iPad, and he was in the same spot for a while. I went to shower. My mom and brother left to go to that area. I got out of the shower and heard a knock on the door. It was my Uncle Robert and Aunt Amanda. I hugged them both and let them inside. My Uncle Robert told me that my dad was in a wreck and he was at a hospital. I said to him, "Can I go see him? I want to see my dad." My uncle and aunt did not tell me much. I remember going to blow dry my hair. They called my mom and brother and told them to come back to the house. I knew when they said that something was wrong. I sat in a chair waiting for my mom and brother to get back home. When they arrived, my uncle told us David was in a wreck and he didn't make it. I was in complete shock, did not process in my brain until the next day. I'm glad that we were all together when we found out. The week that it happened was a spring break of my junior year in high school. I remember that week just being in Stockshill and still processing what happened. Friends and family supported us throughout that week. My boyfriend at the time was supported him as well. Thankfully, I did not have to go to school that week. Once spring break ended, I thought going back to school would be a good distraction. When Monday rolled around, I put on a brave face and went to school. Many people acknowledged me about what happened, and teachers were caring and helpful to me during that time with my academics. It took a while to get back into the groove of life. During college, there were times where I would binge eat and have food delivered to me due to my depression. I am not proud of this looking back on it. There were some days where I wanted to sleep, not get any of my homework or assignments done. Thankfully, I pushed through some of these tough times and got through it. It took me 5 years to get my bachelor's degree in sociology. I'm glad that I did. I have good days and bad days. I try to stay positive and think about good memories that I had with my dad. He helped me with my homework, gave good advice, and was always there for my family members. He was a selfless and loving father. At times, when I hear the name David, it makes me think about my dad. I had some dreams about him after he died. Some made me wake up in the middle of the night and cry a lot. Some days I want to call him and tell him how my life is going, but I can't. I know he would be proud of me. Every Easter Sunday and April 20th, will always be reminded of the tragic loss of my sweet dad. I will always remember his smile and caring personality. This loss has made me stronger, but I miss him daily. Daniel A Verzwyvelt should not be released early and should stay in jail for the entire sentence. And for my back statement, one weekend in March 2014, there was a storm on a tree to fall from our neighbor's yard onto our fence, crushing it. A few weeks later, I was supposed to help my dad bring my uncle's truck to our house to gather the debris and start the repairs. Shortly after sunrise on April 20th, 2014, my mom told my dad to go pick up the truck without me so that I could sleep in a few more hours, and she would make sure I would be ready to help him if he returned. It would normally take about 2 hours to drive to my uncle's house and back to my family's home. My mom called my dad and spoke to him at 10:20 a.m. that morning, and he told her that he would pick up breakfast from McDonald's for us to eat when he made it home, and that he was taking back roads so he could enjoy the view and the nice weather this Easter morning, rather than rushing back via the interstate. Little did he know he would be killed by an impaired driver just minutes after the final conversation with my mom. After repeated phone calls to him with no answer an hour later, I decided to search for his phone's location and saw that it wasn't moving. My dad was extremely communicative with us, and it would have been normal for him to call us after picking up our food, RSC was a few minutes away from my family's home. It shouldn't have taken much more than 30 minutes for him to arrive home after that phone call with my mom. So when I told her an hour later that his location wasn't moving, she began panicking. We quickly decided to drive her car to that location, and she kept having me call him to drive. She kept having me call him. But there was no answer. After 15 minutes of driving, less than 5 minutes away from this phone's location, she received the worst phone call of both of our lives. "Jenny, you didn't make it," my uncle said, and I immediately told her to pull the car over and let me drive us home. She was obviously distraught and it took everything in me to stay focused on getting us back home safely while telling her, "I'm here with you, Mom," the entire way home, even though my heart sunk into the ground and I knew there was absolutely nothing I could do to fix the situation. As we returned home, I punched a hole into the wall in anger, feeling like I could collapse onto the floor and just stay there as the sense of hopelessness overtook me. For at least 6 months afterwards, when I went to lie down to go to sleep, I would stare at the ceiling for more than 3 hours before I fell asleep from exhaustion, as the helplessness, depression, and anger that I constantly tried to push down would overwhelm me. My dad was my best friend. I would call him every day after moving away from home to attend university. It was such a joy hearing his fascinating stories about spending 11 years serving in the United States Navy, mostly working as a machinist mate, helping to operate nuclear submarines. He was passionate about always helping everyone, even if it was the first time he met someone. His career in the U.S. Navy came to an abrupt end after a U.S. Navy jet crashed shortly after takeoff, killing his first wife and unborn child while driving in Norfolk, Virginia. After this tragedy occurred, he returned to Louisiana to be close to his family and pursue a bachelor's degree in business. Out of all the stories he would tell, he shared very little details about this challenging time in his life when he was alone. It seems that him staying busy with his studies kept his mind preoccupied from thinking about the tragic loss he had endured. I never truly understood the extent of his loss until after he was killed. My mom and him got married shortly after meeting, and it was the only true example of love at first sight I believe I've ever seen personally. My dad was extremely happy with my mom, and he was quickly accepted into her family, treating them as his own. He told me that his wedding day with my mom and the days when my sister and I were born were the happiest days of his life. He was truly selfless, caring, honorable, dependable, respectable, loving, the best role model I could think of. On the morning of April 20th, 2014, Daniel Verzwyvelt was stopped by the police on 2 separate occasions before he caused the crash that killed my dad. I do not believe that he will ever be able to comprehend the amount of suffering his egregious behavior and violent actions have caused to my family and the community. He deserves only the maximum allowable punishment to be enforced because he has demonstrated that he is a clear danger to the public. Respectfully, the board should demonstrate that they are serious about fully enforcing the agreed upon settlement for Daniel Verzwyvelt to serve his entire sentence behind bars, as even this sentence is incomparable to the harm he has caused, danger and threat he poses to society, and his lack of regard for members of the public to safely enjoy their life. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tanner, please.
I know you read all of our input. I just want to ask that you consider when you finish starting out with time that we agree. Get that time for us. We did agree upon that. But we had no idea until this morning that the past 3 years that he has been on work release and being on 9 days at a time. He's getting hooked up a long life. Basically, he feels like a lot of men get to do for their family already. And it's just it's very unfair. How do you see it? I had no clue until this morning that he's getting that. We found out even if it's 2021 August, the one that we use on work release program. However, I was told that he was going back to the jail every night. And every place where he was working, so it just quickly amazes me that. I'm sure how they say from her. We constantly changing. But from what we said, as you see that morning, the horrible morning, that he was on that. And I think, although I'm not saying he has not done things to try to help himself, there's still more to be done. I think we have to help people out to get that help. We could say, Ferguson.
Thank you. We appreciate all of them. All right, Daniel, is there anything you'd like to say to us before we vote?
Like I said, if I could go back to that day and take Mr. Fowler's place, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Because no amount of time that y'all have given me is near as painful as having to live with the fact that I took someone away from their family. And I know maybe I haven't gotten in the program, but I've been in recovery. I know what to do. If I would only got 5 or 6 years, I probably wouldn't even got this right. I would have went, I know I wouldn't. I would have went back out there with the same me, same attitude. But somewhere along the way, it clicked and I surrendered myself. And I made a change. These people gave me a chance here. And when they gave me that chance, it's like I said, something just clicked. And then they teach in recovery people, places, and things. I don't have to because my mom is my rock. But I would disown my own mother if it meant me messing with my say they teach you people, places, and things, and I'm not trying to go back to be around anything from my past. And I want the family. I'm very sorry. I mean, it might not mean much, but
I think we're ready to vote. Mrs. Jackson will be voting first.
First, I'd like to thank the Fowler family for being here this morning and speaking with us. Certainly helped me in my decision. Daniel, it's really incomprehensible to me why you weren't stopped by law enforcement and being back on the road. I do not understand that the life you need. But you bear responsibility as well. You knew you were impaired, you demonstrated your impairment. You could have pulled over to the side of the road and it's not coming to pick you up, but you chose, even in spite of falling asleep twice behind the wheel of a vehicle, to continue to drive. And the consequence of your decision making destroyed, I'm not going to say destroyed, because I hope that they still have, meaning and value. But you have certainly impacted their life in a way that, will impact them forever. You haven't really served a lot of your sentence, given the fact that you've been on work release. You're only in the jail, a few days every 3 months. You have taken no programming. You have a history of relapsing when you are out, and you've had no programming while you were in to help reinforce those things. So my vote today would be to deny that, the sentence you received and was, generous in light of the harm that you caused. You're serving easy time. And so my vote today would be to deny the request for early release.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. I apologize. I did not ask for the comments from Mr. Derek Johnson from the District Attorney's Office. We'd like to hear from you now, sir. I apologize. You're still on mute. There you go.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. The office of Philip Terrell, the non-judicial district attorney's office, we're strongly against any early release for Mr. Daniel, the inmate. It is our opinion that he has proved on more than one occasion what he'll do with a second chance, given his history from 07 simple robbery, from 14 when he got convicted of attempted possession of a firearm, and while out on probation, which is a privilege, he committed this heinous crime. And it's been well stated. I'm not going to go over the facts again, but him being stopped twice, I would think that a reasonable human being stopped twice and being impaired would find another way home instead of getting on the road again. If he would have made better choices that night, we all wouldn't be here today. Furthermore, without him taking any programs while he's been incarcerated, shows that it's probably the at the back of his mind for him to want to, better himself and get help from substance abuse programs and victim awareness programs. But he made sure that he's during work release, and it sounds like he has better jobs than some of the people that are out of the system today. We're strong against any release without any long-term programs being completed, and that's where we stand. Thank you.
So thank you. We appreciate the comment from the DA's office. Russia.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank all the family. I know it was difficult, but it adds to the hearing, and I appreciate your comments and your attention. Daniel,
Yes, sir.
based upon a poor supervision history, you were on supervision when you committed this crime.
No,
Based
sir.
on a light,
I wasn't on probation when I committed this crime.
sir, I'm talking.
Yes, sir.
You were terminated unsatisfactorily. Am I right? Am I right?
Repeat that again, sir.
Were you terminated unsatisfactorily at any time?
Was your probation,
I wasn't on probation. I haven't been on probation since like 2008.
Sir, you are at any time in your criminal career were you terminated unsatisfactorily?
Yes, sir.
You have a poor supervision history. It doesn't matter when it was, you have a poor supervision history. And please do not interrupt me when I'm
Yes, sir. I apologize.
a lack of rehabilitative program. You have taken no substance abuse programs. You haven't taken any programs at all. Overwhelming express opposition from the victim family, opposition from the DA's office, and opposition from the Rapides Sheriff's Office. For all these reasons, I deny your request. And it would behoove you, Daniel, to get the place where you can take the substance abuse program, because if you're released in 2024 on your good time date, I'll see you again. Because you have no substance abuse treatment whatsoever. You have a problem and it needs to be addressed. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Roche. Daniel, I was very glad to hear you say that finally something clicked. You wasn't ready for any help beforehand. I know you didn't probably ask for it because you didn't get good time credit for it because you don't learn it. But nonetheless, you finally realized that
Yes,
you
ma'am.
probably, and I do agree with my colleagues. I do think you need some help. The lifetime of struggling that you're faced with. But because of the opposition that's been expressed here today, my vote today also is to deny you parole. Good luck.
Thank you. Y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Thanks. That concludes our business at Lafourche. We'll adjourn. It's 10:18 a.m.
Can't hear anything. What a piece of trash. Wow. How does someone get away with so much? This man has gotten away with murder. If you want to see someone that has gotten away with murder, it's him. And he doesn't even realize it. How dare he even show up to parole? He's been living a life free, making nearly $200 a day on a boat with his buddies. The way the hearing ended, Merry Christmas, he was pissed off. How does someone do armed robbery, possession of a firearm, get probation, get into a car, fall into a ditch, not have a cop do something? Then he got into a 3-car accident. I looked up the records. I'll drop it in the description. And the cops let him go. You gotta be kidding me. Now, I looked it up. I cannot find the cop that let him go. That stuff is just completely hidden, which is ridiculous because, in my opinion, that cop needs to be at the very least fired, if not prosecuted. I'm sure you can't really prosecute, but if he had not been fired, or she, are you kidding me? They ended up suing the city, I think $1 million, and the city, the police department settled at $700,000. And frankly, that's not nearly enough money. I'm kind of speechless. Somehow he has gotten away with murder, and he seems to have gotten away with everything for his entire life. It just boggles my mind. He spends, what is it, 2 days of each month or 2 days every 3 months in jail. He spends 2 days every 3 months in jail. That's less than 3, 6, 9, 12. What was that, 10 days a year he spends in jail? And he's making like 70 something thousand a year before bonuses, and like, where's that money going? He's living on a boat. He's getting fed. He doesn't even have it's like that was his punishment, to go hang out on a boat and make money. And then he comes out and asks for parole and gets pissed off at the board when they say no. And the fact that he only got 10 years.
Good morning.
I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. I can't. It's a really sick thing when you can have it that someone can actually get away with it, given a golden ticket, and then still be such an asshole. He says, I've sat there for over the years and I tried to write a letter, but I can't get past the first sentence. If I could take it back, I wouldn't do it. That's the best that him and his mother were able to come up with. What was it, 7 years later? How did he only get 10-year sentence? It was 10-year sentence with 10-year probation. How? It's not like he was a decent guy that drank too much and got in a car accident after having 2 chances. No, but he has a record. Armed robbery, then a firearm. I mean, this is a bad guy. What is going on? They were saying in the article that he was connected with police, and that's how it happened. And yeah, well, apparently, imagine if we had imagine if they had the cameras, what it would have looked like. That guy is so drugged up out of his face. What is he sitting there with his? How could a cop let him? He got into an accident on the second time. He got into a 3-car accident on the second try, and they let him get back in the truck and go home. And he killed someone. And then he spends the rest of his time on a boat. And then he gets Merry Christmas. That family never saw justice. Never. They had to come out there and say, stay in what? Stay in what? He's not even in jail. Stay in your cushy, fun job with your boys. Unbelievable. Really, there's one thing if it was like where he made a mistake but he didn't. He's just a bad guy. That really is just has been getting away with it his entire life. Looks like he has a temper problem too. I mean, really, it was coming out. He couldn't even help it. He couldn't even help it. On the day that he needed to just be calm, the one time for 35 minutes or whatever, and he couldn't even control himself then. It's got to be a scary dude. 2 days every 3 months in jail. Some things in life just are not fair. There's no explanation for it. There's nothing that we can. He can't write past the first sentence. Really? How about with the money that you've been making, you could have put it towards their kids if you really cared? Did you do any of that? No, I guarantee you haven't done a thing. You didn't. If you care, imagine if God forbid someone was killed, you would at the very least do something like that. Maybe you can't write the letter, but you can donate to his kids. There are things that you can do. He did nothing. The best that he could do to express his remorse is by saying that I wish it didn't happen. If I could take it back, I would. Oh, yeah, I'm sure you would. What am I missing? What happened? The next thing that's a shame is that the police officer involved, or officers, because it was multiple situations, and the tow truck driver has responsibility in it too, but why are those police people, why are their names redacted? Why do we not know who they are? And why were they able to keep their jobs? Because you can't have any pride in your job to let a man who was as high as he was. I checked the report. It was methadone. What's it called? Gosh, no, I'm just going blank. He had 3 hard drugs in his system, 2 uppers and a downer. Methadone, and he had something else. He was really messed up. How do you fall asleep? It's just unbelievable. He's really done. The only thing that he's done right is to stay sober and work really hard. But he shows no remorse. He shows no guilt. He shows no empathy. And no awareness. Like, someone in that situation, how did they even show up to a parole hearing? And I would be, like, he probably spoke to an attorney. I would be terrified. I'd be like, holy cow, someone's going to find out that I'm, like, totally cheated the system, I'd be so afraid to go in front of the board because what if they like took it away from me? You know, like I'd be just like running. I would, you know, why would I want to make this like the situation public? Because he's not. This can happen, and this stuff is happening right now. It's a shame. It's a travesty.